NFL would kick off at the time that they set, regardless of whether our teams are ready or not. We've got people that show up to the stadium at like 6 a.m. getting stuff ready for a 1 o'clock kickoff. That's the bare minimum of what the role is expected of me. There are moments where, like professionally, you're going to be like, I don't think I'm in the right spot. You have to be comfortable and confident in yourself that you know who you are, you're authentic to yourself, you're going to figure this out. Even in those moments where you don't have answers, it's okay not to have answers, but put some thought against what a logical solution may be.
Are there any trends that you're seeing that are really working to drive impact?
We have better tools, better systems in place, so we can help connect you to the fans that maybe are more core or central to your marketing demographic.
As a professional in sports and entertainment, what's been your best experience on the business side?
The sports moment that I really enjoyed the most.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this. I'm your host, Shauna Griffiths, and as always, we've got a real talk with a real leader. I am so pleased to introduce you all to John Codalata. I cannot call him John, Johnny comes out of my mouth, so sorry, Johnny.
Yeah.
Johnny and I have been good friends. We were colleagues. We were in the trenches together. We had some good wins together, and now he's coming to us from the Indiana Colts. Director of Business Solutions there. Johnny, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, for sure. Indianapolis Colts, don't forget. But you're right, because we do represent the state. You said the Indiana Colts.
Oh, and goodness gracious, I'm not even going to re-record that, folks, because, and also that's a really good example of the fact that I'm not really an NFL football.
I was just going to say the same thing. I know you're not an NFL person, but it's... But I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm your second NFL person, because you had Sean Merriman on a few weeks ago or whatever.
I did. I can't believe I did that. But you know what? I am authentic, and this is a real conversation. So we're going to leave it there. I know. So, folks, we did work together at an agency. Johnny, it's been awesome to see you continue to thrive. And I just want to pause because, folks, I always tell you how I know different people come on the show. I'm going to tell you a little bit of why I have Johnny on and what I just love about you, Johnny, and have appreciated so much. I don't actually know if I'd ever shared this with you openly. It was kind of one of those things I thought and never took advantage of. But just your authenticity in general, you have a sense of calm. And we were dealing with some really hard transitions. And within the agency, coming and going and merging. And you were always, again, like a sense of calm. You always also had at the forefront caring about the people in your care. I remember sometimes we were dealing with some heavy stuff and it was like, okay, it got loud in there. And you're like, guys, we got some people out there that we're taking care of. So that was always at your, the forefront. And, I think leadership can also be very lonely. And especially when you're new to a leadership team, when you're coming in, but also when you're bringing someone new in, there's a lot of dynamics there. And that never was a problem. And you actually helped me so much to feel comfortable and part of that, and took a bit of that loneliness away. So I don't go on and on, but I'm going to pause and just thank you sincerely.
Well, thank you very much. That means a lot. I mean, it's not by accident, right? That people become that way and people grow that way. And, sometimes you learn what not to do based on the examples you see around you. And you and I have some shared experiences in that, where we've seen some, what we'll call poor leadership. And when you see that in action and you see how people respond to it, you're like, I do not want to do that. And I have no ill will against those people, but it's exactly the reason you become who you are, right? You see those bad examples and you're like, if I'm ever in that position, I want to do it differently. And I want people to have this type of feeling. I'm an outcomes-based person when it comes to just generally speaking, both personally and professionally. What is the outcome when we have conversations? Do I want to inform somebody? Do I want them to feel safe? Do I want them to know that I've got their back? Do I want them to know that I'm going to take what they're asking me and I'm going to take it to the top of the organization and get an answer? That's that sense of security, that Papa Bear mentality, if you will. It's kind of innate in who I am, and it's probably part of my upbringing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's an element of what you were just saying is there's an element of self-awareness along the way. Like, it is that check of, if I've made the commitment that I want to operate and lead in a certain way, And a lot of that, again, is because I don't want to mimic someone else's behavior. It's not always easy. So again, that
Yeah.
self-awareness, that check-in, that practice, and that course correcting is really important. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, for sure. One of the words I like to use is, and I don't know if it's a real word, but intentionality.
Yeah.
I like to be intentional with the things. Like, I try not to say a lot of things that just come off and it's just, don't be overly verbose, right? I'm not trying to do that. And I don't want to say things just the same. I want to be intentional with my thoughts. I want to be intentional with my actions. And I want the people around me to realize, hey, he's not just saying that to say it. He's really going to do that.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think the other element to all of that is sometimes in order to be able to move forward when you have a bunch of noise or you are operating with someone who's in a leadership seat but not really fitting to lead people, there's sometimes it's just like banding together to find in like-mindedness. It doesn't mean that you're going to be friends with every single person who you're leading
That's right.
with. But there's an element of something bigger than you that you're seeking to set people up for success and to conduct yourself in a certain manner. And sometimes that can just be unspoken. It doesn't have to be this big overt, to your point, of like talking so much and everything. It's just the way you show up every day and really band together. Because the opposite is like you're just fighting amongst yourselves and then it's implosion.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also in those moments when you see kind of those bad examples, talking with a group of people, letting them know that's not really how we operate. That is in isolation and that person's in a different role. But for us, this is how we're going to operate. It comes from a place of caring, being intentional with our actions, being committed to what we need to do for our partners or whatever the business might be.
Yeah, true. It's such a good point because I think you have that within the leadership team, but then I think where there can be a lot of a gap is when you're not actually then communicating that to the people that are
That's
in
right.
care because they're left figuring out or like kind of seeing things, looking around, going like, I don't know what the hell to believe, what's going
Yeah.
on.
And is that okay? Can I act like that? No, the answer is no, you cannot. And let's, those tend to work themselves out over time, but you have to set that kind of mentality and that approach with people that might see those examples and be like, that's definitely not how we're going to operate here.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's funny that you said Papa Bear because when you just said that, the look on your face and the tone of your voice, I can imagine you say to your kids, yeah, no, we're not operating like that here.
No, absolutely. Right. So my kids, I'm very matter of fact with, we'll have very frank conversations. They're 10 and 12. And I hope it's helping. I don't know. I'll know in maybe 10 or 15 years. So, but yeah, I try to have the same approach, right? No kid gloves necessarily. So we try to be adults and talk to my kids as though they're kids, but they're grown-ups to some extent, but not adults.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that transparency is so important. And I remember actually when we were working together, I remember some of the feedback I would get from you or some of the other people around that just appreciated the transparency that I brought to our
Yeah,
situation.
absolutely.
So I just think you do that. And I think it's something that I just call out for the audience because I think some of the things that we've talked about here, again, kind of recapping is like, again, accountability, self-awareness, transparency, some of that, having your own compass and also the way you're conducting yourself is what you just talked about was as a leader in life. It's not like we talked about this earlier, like when you come to the office, or the office air quotes, wherever that is, or in life with your family or whatever, there is a core element to, is this an authentic position for you to come from to be leading people and caring about people in care?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I touched very briefly on some of your things you've done. I want to pause and make sure that you can share with the audience your evolution. And we talk about that a lot on the show. And that is a lot of times that mix between professional and personal. But you're in this amazing seat that is coveted by many now. We're for an NFL team in your, area that you've grown up in and everything. So tell us how you got there, because it took a lot of work and a lot of kind of bopping and weaving to get yourself there.
Yeah, for sure. It's everybody has their own unique journey, right? So, and mine's no different than some others. It's just, my different twists and turns are going to be unique to my own story. But, it really starts at, I kind of want to go back a little bit because I'm from a very small town. I think you've heard me tell this story, right? So I grew up here in central Indiana at a very small town, went to a high school called Eminence High School. And at the time, I think I had like 23 or 24 kids in my graduating class. And this was a public school, right? So we only had, I think, in the overall high school, there was like 140 kids. Now, a lot of people would be like, oh, I had more than that in my own class. So, it was a very rural, farm, ag-based community. But I have some of my best friends today are from that place, right? So I learned my core values, right, at that kind of place. So then I go to this major university at IU. I had 6,600 kids in my freshman class. So, talk about a culture shock, but that ability to kind of adapt and then thrive and then continue to, take on more. That's what I saw in college. And then immediately graduated and was like, oh, I'm going to come out and get this awesome job because I'd studied marketing and had an operations management, I had a double major. I was like, I'm going to do all this stuff. And then the real world hits you right in the face. You're like, I don't have the qualifications. I was a terrible interviewer. I didn't have the right speaking skills, communication skills, the right confidence. And, I ended up working back with my friends in construction for a while just to kind of get my feet underneath me and like really level set with myself. Like, what am I going to do with this? And then was able to get a job in sales, selling copiers and fax machines. And I will tell you that the reason I am where I am today is because I failed at that job.
Oh, wow.
I was not good at the sales part. I was good at getting leads and talking to people and being authentic and talking about their solutions that we could probably provide. But that point of where you can close a sale, I was just like, well, what do you think? And I didn't really have that closer mentality, right? So, that took me so I left there and went to work for a small family-owned agency and worked a lot in the event marketing space. In fact, I was traveling the country in this big rig where we were setting up at exhibits, or setting up a massive exhibit. It was on ABS brakes, if that tells you kind of my age, if you will. So I was traveling the country. And through that, though, I was able to get exposed to some sports marketing aspects. So started working in some motorsports spaces, doing some hospitality work, doing some event marketing, doing some account management. And all along, if you think of what my golden thread will be, my storyline, it's going to be solutions based. So I started to be able to kind of find my own and be able to kind of develop solutions. So met a contact there who went to another agency. I followed him. He kind of ushered me into this role. And I got my first foray into the motorsports marketing space and really just found my passion. I thought, this is it. Like the light bulb moment when you're working with a brand, you're working around a sports property, you're developing solutions that are very unique to that program. You're like, I think this is it. I think I found my moment. And I really just dug in really quickly and was able to kind of move up there, take on different responsibilities, take on different leadership roles. It was just amazing, right? So over time, that agency, as you well know, moved in, it evolved, it sold to different people several different times over, right? And then in 2017, it became a different named agency.
Yeah.
And, I was able to continue to evolve myself, right? So I went from, kind of running running an account to overseeing accounts and managing people. And then ultimately what I found is that the partnerships we had, it always felt like something was missing. We were great at the activation side, but I was really focused on the strategy and the data and analytics and the measurement behind it. And it was just thinking through that allowed me to evolve inside the agency and find a different role that was really more kind of consulting based, right? So that then led to kind of where you and I met, right? And started working with each other. And you saw me as somebody like, I wasn't an activation person at all, right? I was data and analytics and kind of high level strategy and really more of kind of that internal subject matter consultant, right?
Yeah.
So that's really kind of where you and I kicked off. And then, as we both moved on from the agency, I found this opportunity here within the club where everything that I loved about what I was doing at the agency is here and then some. It's kind of like it's magnified to a point where not only do I get to impact the organization and the club, I can impact our partners and their objectives, right? So, the one thing I always thought I lacked at the agency was that sense of community, because as you remember, our agency had more national and global brands, and I was based here in Indianapolis, and I wanted that feeling here locally, because we did have a nice small office here at the time. It was big, and then evolved, and then kind of ended up being a little more smaller, kind of medium size, and our community was really that group of people. But being tied into the community, doing more volunteering events, really giving yourself, that's what the club has really brought to me, and it's really opened my eyes on how important that the role that the club plays, the Indianapolis Colts play in this community, and my ability to kind of impact that and be a part of that. That's really kind of it's made an impression on me. So, long story short, it was very surreptitious, right? I was all over the place through relationships, through kind of pushing myself through growth. Found myself in this role that is really feels like it's allowing me to kind of capitalize on my strengths, but also grow in some of my weaknesses as well, right? So I'm very fortunate to be here, to be one of 32 across the globe so far, and really make a positive impact on the organization.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's so amazing to hear you talk about it. And there's a couple things I want to touch on from your, sharing that. And the first one is, for people who are listening, I think that sometimes we think we have to know exactly what our next step is, or we have to see exactly what the next thing is. Or when we do have some younger people who, tune in and stuff, and it's like, well, I have to know what I want to do when I'm coming out of college, or, or to your point, I think I arrived and this is it for me. And it's like, well, that in the moment it is. And, and there just takes such a long time to get to a certain point in your career where you're like, oh, you start to feel actually comfortable.
Yeah.
Not comfortable in a negative way, but you actually know what you're doing, and you're less of flying by the seat of your pants every day. But then that is that's for then. And then there's another layer to the evolution.
Yep.
And I think sometimes I've caught myself, especially in the last 3 years of all the changes I've been through with different jobs and layoffs and stuff, is those moments where you have frustration of well, I'm not there yet. I've been trying this for 6 months and I'm not there yet. And I love when we hear these stories of people's evolution, because you gave a span of time. So we can actually, as more senior people, look at it and go, it's not going to happen for me overnight as a senior person either. There is going to be some time and some almost our own sweat equity for our own personal selves and brand, right? That it's just going to take some time. So thank you. It was a really good kind of, it just made me think of that.
I think what I would add to that is, and this is something that I learned, is just being comfortable, being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. There are moments where, professionally, you're going to be I don't think I'm in the right spot, or I don't have all the right answers, or I can't figure all this stuff out. You have to be comfortable and confident in yourself that you know who you are. You're authentic to yourself. You're going to figure this out. You're going to, keep thinking more a couple years down the road. I've got to put in the hard work now because I know the payoff is there. Yeah. I'm in an organization, I can see the opportunity, or I know of a place that I want to check out some opportunity, but I need to do this right now, be comfortable here, live in this moment, but continue to have that eye on kind of what's coming down the road. So that was something learned for me too, because I thought you just get in, you do all these things, and then voila, you're a leader or something like that, or you're, got a senior title of some sort. And that's just not how it is, right? Again, it's all learned.
It's so true. And I think even when we hear this, we're coming out, we're like, yeah. But then when you're in it and you're experiencing it, it's a whole nother level of reality. Yeah.
For sure.
Right. Well, one thing that even comes through in your story, and I did think of this when I was preparing for our conversation today, it's you've got a great way of doing the best with what you have in the moment. And some of that is not focusing totally on the negative and getting stuck in that. You said earlier, you're solutions oriented,
Mm-hmm.
So it's you got to do something to move the ball forward. And I've seen you do that with projects. You remember that one global brand we were working on, and we had to come up with some sort of valuation tool. And we didn't actually have it. Folks, Johnny just made it. He was he showed up one day. It's here, guys, I got it. And it was who are you? How did you do this? But it's a perfect example of just being well, I'm going to make the best with what I have, find a solution, run it forward, galvanize my team, and knock it out.
Yep, that's always my goal, right? So even in those moments where you don't have answers, it's okay not to have answers, but put some thought against what a logical solution may may be,
Mm.
and then bounce it off a couple people, right? So, I mean, if you're at this point in your career, you're always looking for something different, something to do, twist and turn. You probably learn some things along the way, like, okay, if I had this square over here and it mixes with this triangle and I put it in this, oh, well, what can I get? Like that's, it's kind of a mad scientist to some extent. So
Yes, and if people are listening to this and they're like, "Yeah, my brain doesn't operate that way," I can guarantee there's somebody within your circle that you're working with, your group of colleagues, your peers, could be someone more junior than you that does think that way.
that's
So,
right.
like, I think that's a great another example, and I saw you work with our team that way. Again, that global brand client project I'm talking about,
Yeah.
it was amazing to see you operate in that capacity and then also, like, be co-lead with me on that project. So, the other thing that, just stood out to me in as you were talking about your own evolution, I mean, there were many things. But again, is like even in the roles that you took on, it wasn't like you saw a job description, you were like, okay, I'm gonna go do exactly what that job description says. There was
Yeah.
a lot of you being pioneering in creating different roles, seeing a gap within an organization, stepping into a role and elevating the role actually to what maybe they hired you for, you thought you were going to step into. So tell us a bit about any examples there or how do you do that?
Well, it's I would say most people do that to some extent. It's really about their intentionality behind it, right? So when you see a role profile and somebody from HR posts like, "Hey, here's the goals or objectives of this role," to me, I always look at that's the starting point.
Yeah.
Like that's the bare minimum of what the role is expected of me, right? So what is it like once you get in and you get yourself comfortable and you understand the players, you understand the space, whatever industry you're in, and you understand the culture, where can you start to really make an impact? And that's where it's like, maybe we need something, and I'm just going to make up some things here, but maybe we need more employee-based moments. And maybe I'll go talk to the HR person and say, hey, I've got some ideas because I've experienced this in the past. What do you think about that? Or maybe I'll talk to our chief sales and marketing officer. Hey, I've got this idea for this new opportunity, right? So there's always moments and times where that as you kind of understand the role and you start to really kind of feel that confidence and you take command of that, where can you press a little bit forward in some things and maybe test a couple things? It's just always been part of me. Like when I explained to you that role that I had out of college where I was a salesperson and I failed, I never thought in my life, hey, in 25 years, I'm going to be selling copiers and fax machines. And that's no disrespect to the people who do. They're just really good at that job.
Yeah.
I just wasn't. But I knew it was a means to an end, that it was a starting point for me. And where I ended was not going to be the same spot. So
Yeah.
I think that's just kind of innate in who I am.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think again, it's like even people who are, again, like at the level that you're at within an organization, you are a senior member of an organization. It is still taking that on a daily basis. How do I take it to the next level? Where's the gap? Where's that? And I think I talk about it a lot as like a business athlete mindset, a
Yeah.
leadership athlete mindset, where on a daily basis, you're not competing necessarily against other people. You really want to like better yourself every day to get, because that's at the end of the day, what to your point earlier, what is going to maximize your impact on the organization with the
Yep.
partners that you're working with. Um, I also, you've talked to me a bit over time about your philosophy about how you're operating in your role every day to with the person above you. Like what is that philosophy you have about how you're operating and what does that do with the dynamic with the person who is, because most of us have a boss. It doesn't matter how
That's
senior
right.
you are. Even a person who's a CEO or president of the company has a boss, which is usually like the ownership team. So,
Yeah.
you know, so I would love for you to share like what your philosophy is about that, because again, for this audience.
Yeah, for sure. I think my philosophy just boils down to, again, I'm solutions minded, solutions focused. It's in my title. So I
Yeah.
feel, I feel some pressure to always deliver on that. But no, my philosophy is really simple. It's how do I make their jobs easier? But how am I taking the friction out of their role? right? So as you know, in most organizations, there's always some type of friction, and friction doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. It's just that, it's always what keeps you up at night, right? I'll talk to my boss like, hey, what's keeping you up? From a work perspective, are there solutions we can think about that? Is there something I can take on that you can then focus on over here, right? Because that's a bigger priority. So, if you're thinking about it that way, because you can come in every day and there's always a ton to do. And there's always going to be a new priority that pops up. But can you keep in mind what the bigger priorities are so you can continue to kind of push forward? And sometimes you might only move something forward an inch, and then some days you may move it forward a lot, but continue to kind of keep making progress. And it's in those moments, though, when you're trying to make progress, how do you take the friction out of that so you can continue to move forward? So it's really one of my biggest areas of focus is just when you sit down with people in leadership roles, what's keeping them up? Where's the friction at? How can I deliver against that? And by the way, I can't get there if the baseline of my role and my expectation, if I'm not doing that well. You have to do that at a high level to be in a position to offer, the opportunity to help somebody kind of alleviate some pain points.
I'm glad we're talking about, because I don't think I've actually touched on this with anybody yet, but I think there really is this thing of sometimes, again, as more senior people, we know what like the goals that we have, and we're so focused on them. And yes, we may think about how, well, most of the time, and hopefully we're thinking about how that actually ladders up to the bigger organization goals. We're thinking about our people and what we have to do that day to lead them. And I love the way you're talking about that head up, step back, and actually think about our boss, the person that we're reporting into, and pausing to be like, wait, well, how can I actually be of service to them? Because, or like, how can I make, I love that you said that, like, how can I make their lives easier? Again, in the big picture, that's going to make everything, run more efficiently. But I think that's something that we talk about more for more junior people. And it's something that's great to have like called out for more senior people, where it's like, that's still part of the magic too, I would say.
Yeah. And to the part about junior staff, like I'll speak with our junior staff on like where are your pain points as well. Like it goes both ways, right? Like, somebody's priority at the top of the organization flows all the way down. So if you can help eliminate friction along the way, it makes everybody, a little bit better, right? So it's and sometimes you gotta take that on, and it might be painful at times, but I've always felt good about taking on things that may become a challenge for others, or maybe just too cumbersome, or it's just too painful. Again, using that term loosely, because I always feel confident that I'll be able to kind of deliver a solution against that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the phrase that I came up with, or I don't know how I started using it, but it was really something that unlocked some ease for me when it was with the staff that I was working with. To your point, was to ask them like, what can I take out of your way? Like, again, it's that kind of a blocking and tackling philosophy of like, I just want to take away that noise, that that friction that you talk about, to allow you to just focus on what you need to do today. But again, like it goes up, it goes up, it goes down, and we really have to think about that as leaders.
Of course.
Yeah. So I want to get back to kind of your experience, what you're dealing with on a daily basis. So talk to people about what in your current role, what does that look like on a air quotes daily basis? Because I know when you're in a professional sports team, it changes in different periods of the year.
Right.
But help people understand, how do you fit into the organization and the different units that exist?
Yeah, for sure. So my title is Director of Business Solutions, but I sit within our partnerships department, right? So, and in most clubs, the partnerships they're out there, they're trying to drive revenue, they're trying to deliver solutions, right? So you have a sales part and you have your activation. So sales is the revenue part, activation is the solutions part. So I get to sit squarely in the middle of that, which is a really comfortable spot for me. And I really enjoy being there because I get to work on the sponsorship sales side, the strategy side, building out these massive, complex, and sophisticated sponsorship programs that scale up all the way for national brands, and you can scale them back for local brands that are just looking to do one or two different things, right? I really enjoy that type of scale and the complexity that goes in each one. And then on the activation side, it's really working with our teams on, what are we doing at the stadium where they could use some help? how do we measure, or quantify program success or failure, whatever that might be. So again, I get to sit in the middle of all of that. So from a day-to-day perspective, I spend a lot of time working with our sales team on whether it's renewals or new pitches, or just kind of tweaking some of the assets that we have in a current deal and really working through those. Plus, I get to develop a lot of the sales materials we have. So a lot of the pitches and proposals I have either developed kind of ahead of time, or some of the imagery, some of the text, whatever that is. And I work with our team really to kind of say, hey, you guys are the lead sales guys. I'm not a salesperson like they are. They're professionals and they're great at their job. But I take what they give me and we kind of put that together in a nice, sophisticated kind of slide presentation.
Oh, okay.
So that's really, from a day-to-day perspective, it's really focused on the sales side. And then on the activation side, where I'm working with our teams, will be a lot. And again, I think I touched on it, right? That proof of performance.
Yeah.
But then the one thing I haven't really talked about is like, what are you doing during game days, right? So a lot of people will ask me, well, if you're working on sales all the time and you're working on activation programs, well, what do you do for the game? Because a lot of people, when you think about the NFL, they think about that moment in time on a Sunday afternoon between 1 and 4 o'clock Eastern. Well, a lot of times we're spending time with prospects or partners that we're hosting inside the stadium. But there's a lot of logistics, and you know this because you've been in this space, Shauna. There's a lot of logistics that go into like everything before kickoff, right?
Yes.
The NFL will kick off at the time that they set, regardless of whether our teams are ready or not. So all of the programming and activation that we have to be in place, we've got people that show up to the stadium at like 6 a.m. getting stuff ready for a 1 o'clock kickoff. And and really, when you open the gates at I think it's like 11 a.m. for a 1 o'clock kickoff, now you've got people all around, so you've got to manage through some of that. So between the sales side, the activation side, and then what we get to do on game days and entertain and host clients and see and bring those programs to life, that's really kind of what I focus on from a day-to-day perspective.
Got it. Thank you so much. It's so funny that I started laughing. You were talking about all the stuff that goes on and how the game starts, no matter if anybody's ready.
That's right.
I was just the reality that you learn a whole different level of deadline when you actually work for I'll call it a sports team, probably the same in, I don't know what, theater or something like that. But it's like, there's no reopen the doors. It's like those doors are opening at, 1 o'clock, 7 o'clock, regardless of what, so
Yeah.
that's actually kind of funny because when I've gone into other settings outside of, professional sports, and people are like, I need it ASAP. I was like, yeah, no, that is not a priority. You don't know the deadline. I don't know the deadline.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I remember in my old days at the agency, we weren't allowed to say ASAP.
Yeah, no, that's, and seriously, it's like a deadline means a whole different thing than like,
That's right.
wait, can we actually move this or not? That is going to determine the level of urgency.
That's right.
No, so I thank you for sharing all of that. Because you're dealing the internal, you're also dealing with the brands, the marketers. What do you think is some of the most important thing for brands, for marketers to understand about whether it's the fans, the audiences, and a sports property in general? Because I think there's a lot of perceptions, misperceptions, but from your seat, what do you think is some of the most important things for people to realize?
Yeah, I think, I think one, and first and foremost, I think it's across all clubs and organizations. We want to deliver the best solution, the best experience, whatever it is. We want to deliver that for our partners. We stay up late at night thinking about how we are going to create X, Y, or Z for partners. So I think as long as everybody knows that we're trying to do our best, but we're limited, right? We're just like those organizations are challenged. We have limited resources as well. But what we get to do, which is really creative, is we get to lean into content teams and we get to lean into our on-air talent to create these unique solutions. So we can be very creative on our side. But again, you kind of have to couch that. It's around football, right? We're not trying to create a commercial for one of our partners, right? So we're a football organization and football will lead us, right? So all of our solutions are going to kind of be club or football focused in that respect. So, if a furniture partner wants to come in and say, hey, all we want to do is, attach ourselves to anything that talks about furniture. Well, that's going to be really tough because we're not talking about furniture. We talk about football.
Right.
Now, can we find a unique way that one of the players has this awesome couch that he bought at your store and he wants to talk about that? Absolutely. And that's where the magic happens, right? When we find those authentic moments between what a brand wants to do and what our club wants to do. And you really just, that's the natural progression of what we want to get out of our partnerships.
Yeah.
So I think that's really the key. Plus the other thing is that we want to be able to measure and quantify your programs. So we need to understand what those objectives are on the front end. And sometimes when people say, well, we want to grow our awareness, what does that mean? Can you be more specific? Are you looking for awareness overall, awareness within a specific demographic, awareness amongst Colts fans? Because that's where we're going to focus our efforts, right? So again, being specific around some of your objectives are really going to help us build that unique solution, but then also help you quantify how you can measure that. One of my favorite questions to ask partners is how will you be judged on the performance of this program? You'll find out pretty quickly how a partner really looks at this partnership, right? So is it really awareness, or is it that they're trying to grow more business or business-to-business opportunities or host key clients? You'll get that out of some of those conversations. So you can build a program completely different if you truly understand what you're trying to accomplish from a brand perspective.
Totally. Two things on that. The first one is that how it's pretty awesome how the first thing that you said, like, we're trying to do our best. And then also having that conversation of what are you truly trying to do and stuff.
Yeah.
Those are so directly related, because sometimes when you're trying to ask the brand that, it feels like this adversarial thing, or no, it's like, so I think as people are listening, who are listening, it's really seeing that person as your partner in solving for this problem.
Correct. And that's what we want to be. We are partners. Like, we don't really say the word sponsorship, because sponsorship kind of comes off transactional at times. Right. But partnerships, we want to be your partner. We want to be a long-term partner.
Yeah. And I think there is this, like, for brands out there, like, believe that, because I think there can be some of that. People have been burned and
yes, that's
like
right.
That. I think the ability to lean in that and really see, is it reciprocal? Then you can together. It's not like sometimes people are like, oh, well, you figure it out, team. Or, or the opposite of that is, I'm going to come to you and say, hey, Johnny, you're sitting in this seat, but I want you to execute exactly X, Y, Z. And it's like,
yeah,
okay, hold on a second. This is something that we're going to build together, because each side knows what'll actually work on the other side. So, and then the other thing that stood out to me was, you were saying all that, is there's such a similarity between what you're saying, what you're doing with brand partners. It's like the same as when you're on the agency side and you're trying to do that for your client partner. So again, people who are listening, if you're not in the sports property side, or, trying to get into the sports property side as a brand, again, like, this is the same stuff on the agency side. They are still your partners. You're trying to work with them. It's that same dynamic. You're still selling your services, air quotes.
Yep, correct. And, underlying all that is communication. You got to have great communication, right? So understanding that, we kind of go back to the NFL will kick off at the time that they designate, whether everybody's ready or not, right? Yeah. So they're always going to kick off. So our partners, last minute things are always going to pop up, but the sooner we can get out in front of our planning for the season is always great. I mean, we're sitting here and it's in September, so the season's already underway, but we started planning for it in June. Some partners don't finalize their plans until August. That actually creates a little bit of friction in the system, right? Because you got to get so much, as you got to get so much in the system to get ready for those game days. So communication, of course, is key.
Absolutely. Are there any trends that you're seeing that are really working to drive impact, whether it's for the organization or for or with the brand? Any trends that are working or aren't working?
Yeah, well, the overused word is data. So I'll say it because we do say it a lot, right? And whether it's AI, which is kind of a buzzword as well, like, all that stuff has a place, but really is what can you do with the data that's going to be a better opportunity, a better solution for our partner. So we're getting better in that space, and being able to kind of really identify our fans at a kind of a more of a micro level. Because at first, we could always get a name or an email, and we got so many people in a database. Well, now we have better tools, better systems in place, so we can help connect you to the fans that maybe are more core or central to your marketing demographic. So we can, create some kind of customized messaging. That stuff's becoming more the norm. And becoming, there's more velocity to that, right? The volume of those opportunities are becoming greater than, kind of what's known as spots and dots, right? Yes, it's important to have a presence in the stadium. You want to connect your partnership back to the fans there, but the ability to kind of connect to the data, the messaging, social, digital, all of that's really kind of come to the forefront. And it has for years. I'm not saying anything new here, and I think people understand that. But as we as a club, we get more sophisticated in our ability to kind of sift through that data to get you connected to the right people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, again, like my days in working for a sports property has been, it's been some time, but from my experience to what I see now, it has been like, I don't really think that much data was being used. I mean, a little bit here or there, but I
Yeah.
really think it is only going to continue that way. And the more we can lean into it, then really to your point, like leveraging that and using it to, sometimes that's also like using it to be able to tell the right story that we want to tell.
100%. Like on the front end with our sales materials, I'm working with our consumer database to really kind of glean out some insights that make sense to our partners, right? So, I always sit through and think about what a partner's objectives are. Well, if they can be specific, then I can search into the database and either, get beyond the demographic data, get some attitudinal, some psychographic information, and truly understand what is making, fan X, Y, or Z click, and how we can connect the partnership in a way that really allows that brand to kind of yield some benefit from the partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't have that much time left. So I just want to kind of tangent for a second because I meant to say this earlier. Is one thing that happens a lot with, as you and I were leading as a female, as a male, a lot of times the gender dynamics that people talk about, right? Or they'll talk about, oh, professional sports is just quite frankly, white males dominate and they all act in a certain way. And I just want to pause because I had a completely different experience with you with that. I had a completely different experience with several other people, Matt Pizzaris, Fred Mangione, of real mutual respect. And always, I never felt either minimized because of my gender or taken advantage of because of my gender. And so I just want to call that out again, kind of like shifting from some stereotypes.
Sure.
And I actually want to give an example. One time you and I were in a meeting with a client, and the client said something very off color, a few things very off color.
Remember that.
And yes, and in the moment you could almost feel, I was the only woman in our all white male team, and all the people at the table were also other white men. And I remember everyone, you could feel the energy of like total discomfort, except for the person who said it, who was on to something else. And in the moment I saw you kind of tense and like notice me in the room. And then, but it was great because in the moment you didn't say something that made it uncomfortable and an issue and all of that. And afterward, we were all together later and you mentioned something about it, just that you too were uncomfortable. And I use it as an example because for other people who are listening, if you're a person in your seat as a male in that, there's a way to handle it that can be really effective. And the way you handled it made me feel okay. And you also brought it to the conversation. You didn't swipe it under the rug and be like, oh, what happened? And then again, for women, it's not always that you're going to be taken advantage of. It's a male dominated where everybody's going to treat you frankly like shit. So I really wanted to bring that out and ask if there's any thoughts that you have about that, or again, kind of how did you know to operate that way in those moments?
Great question. I would say so. I'm kind of a mama's boy, and I don't have daughters of my own, but I have a niece who I love very much, and I kind of live by that, be the change you want to see in the world. And I want her to grow up in a place where gender, color, whatever it is, people are just looking for the best you. and I don't care what that is and what it looks like and how you dress and who you love, doesn't matter. It's really just be your authentic self and bring the best you to those meetings, right? So we're all trying to solve a problem for a partner or whatever it is. And I just I've always operated like I'm going to lean on you or other people to do their very best, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of whatever it is, whatever those biases may be, because we all have a goal and objective, right? Our goal in that meeting was to try to get some business, or it was try to get a solution put together, right? So, and in that moment, that person said something, and I looked at you, and I remember that look on your face, and I just want to acknowledge with you that I don't like that. I don't
Yeah.
think that was right. And we talked about it, and I know we kind of laughed it off later, but I always thought it was important for me to acknowledge that, hey, that's not how we
Yeah.
bringing it back to our beginning part of the conversation. That's just not how we operate. We're going to operate in a place of mutual respect for everybody moving forward, and we're all going to do our jobs, and we're not going to try to break people down or discriminate in any way. Just, I think it's just part of my upbringing, and I've always, I can't say that I've always been the nicest person in the past when I'm maybe a little overconfident. But over time, through some humility and some, failure, you you'll learn some things, again, learning from mistakes and just being able to kind of operate the right way. So there's no really, I don't think I have a good answer to that other than I just think that acknowledging those things and making sure people are comfortable around me and understand that, hey, I may not be able to fix that, but I acknowledge with you that that wasn't right.
Yeah. It's so great the way you explained it too, because when I actually was telling the story, I was talking about me. I was talking about you and our interaction and how it made me feel when we were sitting with the group of our team and you did bring it up and the way that and, and so I actually want to say like that was also part of it is to your point, you made sure that everybody sitting there knew we don't operate that way, but you did it in such a, um, you weren't trying to teach people a lesson. You're just authentically saying like, this is how we operate and not like that. So,
Yeah.
again, I really appreciate being able to pause on this part because to help people maybe think differently about how to act in those moments. Do you say something? Do you not? How do you say something? Or sometimes people feel like, oh, I have to say something right now in this moment when that was said. Nope, doesn't have to be right then. There's a
That's right.
way
Yeah.
to handle it that you can actually have a solution, a positive impact, to the business that we were trying to create and also still take care of the people in your care. And in that moment, I felt in your care.
Yeah. Yeah. There's allyship in that too,
Yeah.
right? So, and there's a lot of good, over the last few years with some of our DE&I efforts, there's a lot of good trainings out there, just some things that you can pick up that you think like, oh, well, that's common sense, right? And then you realize it's really not, and you
Yeah.
understand more how to kind of handle those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to wrap this up here. I want to get outside of kind of, we went deep on some things, your experiences. So as a professional in sports and entertainment, what's been your best experience on the business side?
Oh man, it's such a tough question because I thought about that too. I'm like, what is my best? Because I have had so many experiences. My role has allowed me to kind of travel the globe and be involved in really massive global sports moments, right? And do things that I never thought I would do or meet people that I never thought I would meet. But I think there are certain things that kind of come back to. So if I think about like the sports moment that I really enjoyed the most, I went to the Ryder Cup in 2016 in Minnesota, and that was an amazing experience, a bucket list kind of moment that I never knew that I needed until I got there. So
Yeah.
again, worked in motorsports, worked in all these sports, but going to that one golf moment and just seeing that, the US versus European rivalry was just so amazing. But then, the experience I've had that I have got to kind of personally help build a solution or deliver for a partner, I'll go back to some of the work we've done with Crown Royal and some of our veterans in the past. We used to have this race where we would name it after a veteran. And we did that for so many years. And every year it brought out this emotion and this passion in you that I can still feel today when you get to see somebody out there who, maybe they're a double amputee or maybe something's happened with some PTSD. Because it wasn't just the one person. There was always a group of people that you got to interact with. And it made you feel so proud about the work that you did, that you could deliver a moment in time and an experience for somebody who's been through so much. And they felt so thankful to you. And you're like, I I don't deserve that. Like, you kind of, there's almost a little bit of imposter syndrome, but
Yeah.
those moments, again, I can feel it in my heart. I can feel it in my chest about what that really means to me as a professional in the sports marketing world.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So was your Ryder Cup experience, was that more on the fan side or was it still through the lens
Yeah,
of?
that was more on the
Yeah.
fan side. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. That was such an amazing experience to be able to be up there and see that. And of course, the U.S. won.
Yeah.
So it was just, it's an amazing thing. And what's funny too is like, we've been to all these big events, but that one moment, it was kind of 4-day opportunity for me. That just continues to stick out as my top experience as a fan.
That's awesome. So I know I've got to let you go. We've got a game coming up this weekend that you've got to prep for, and so I don't want to take more of your time. But I do always ask people because we touch on so many topics here
Yep.
today. Is there any like one or two takeaways that you want to make sure that the audience has from our time together today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the things is don't be afraid. Definitely don't be afraid to say no, but there are times where maybe you're afraid to say yes because you don't want to take on too much. So understand who you are to yourself and find those right times to definitely say no. It's important that people say no at times, but it's also just as important to say yes to things that you think are maybe take you underwater a little bit, but you'll figure out growth in those moments.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think the other thing is, as people reach out and they want to connect with people, being clear on your expectations with that person. I know you get hit up on LinkedIn quite a bit. I like to speak to students in colleges and universities all the time. Being clear what you're trying to get out of that person. I'm okay if you reach out to me and say, hey, can I get 30 minutes or 15 minutes? I just want to talk to you about your career path and what I may need to be considering. As opposed to say that versus, I just like to pick your brain.
Yeah.
That's a tough one, right? Because you just don't know where it's going to go. You're busy, I'm busy, everybody's busy. So let's just help manage my expectations. So let's be clear. I think that's been something that's really been beneficial for me. And then the last thing, I said it earlier, but be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It sounds simple. It's definitely not. It's through growth that you get there. I definitely was not that way when I was younger. But now I'm okay being in those awkward moments because I'm just comfortable with who I am and what I think I can bring to the solution or whatever that might be.
Yeah. Johnny, you're so awesome. You are such like a bright light in the journey. I'm so grateful to be your friend, to be able to have work beside you. And I love seeing you just thrive and flourish in what you're doing. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thanks for reaching out. So it's this surpasses my wildest dreams. Again, I'm a kid from a very small town. I didn't think I'd be talking on a computer with somebody sitting where you're at, talking about the things that I've done in my career. That kind of escapes me a little bit in terms of realizing the things that I've done. So thank you very much for being a friend and continue to stay connected in these times. And thank you very much for allowing me to kind of tell my story.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, have a great day. Thanks so much for tuning in.